Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the weekly preview show for Minnesota United hosting Austin on the weekend in Major League Soccer. I am joined by the one and the only Manny Lagos. I'm Kyndra D. Sanov. I am not Jonathan Harrison, but, you know, other things happen, life happens, and so I am pinch hitting, filling in. I don't know what the correct terminology is for soccer. Next man up mentality, as we've seen Minnesota United doing as well these days with some of the injuries and call-ups and whatnot. So Manny, thanks for taking the time for joining me. And is it raining where you are? Because I'm kind of done with the rain.
I think we're in a lull, but I think it's starting back up. So it's been crazy. I mean, it just is nonstop. Let's hope it's done by tomorrow night for Austin. But it's been a wild week, and I just did find I'm such a lifelong Minnesotan, but I didn't realize this is actually the rainiest month of the year in the Twin Cities. I had no idea.
Always? Like every year it's the rainiest
Well,
month?
traditionally, from
Really?
on average, June has the most rain of any month of the year.
Well, and then this year I think is exceptional. I mean, like I know there was one day they said in like 12 hours, like the area got enough rain like you'd get in a month.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like we've had that every day. Like I know
Yes.
I just looked at the news this morning, and in Stillwater, which is where I'm from, the St. Croix River is like right at the bottom of the lift bridge. The benches on the side of the river where people sit and enjoy the view are underwater, which is normally what they experience like when the snow melts and winter ends. And they have sandbags, like they're not expecting that in like mid to late June. So we like, oh, we need the rain. And I'm like, we don't need the rain. Like, I think we're good. We're good.
I think we got the one positive is our practice fields and the stadium look really nice. They have greened up really well.
Everything looks beautiful. I mean, the greenery is amazing, but the sprinklers were on a little bit of training today. And I was like, I don't know what the protocol is on that, but it kind of feels like we've had enough rain. You know, like you need one of those rain sensors. But I know they like it slick for the training session, so I get it. But
the coaches even like to speed it up as much as they can. So rain plus sprinklers are like double rain.
It's like a bonus. It's, you know, any guy that comes from Europe is like, wow, this is perfect. It's always raining and gray and awful where we are. So speaking of Europe, the Euros, we've got Copa America. I mean, I feel like every time we talk in the summer, we're like, oh, it's the summer of soccer. But now it's like every summer is the summer, plus the Olympics coming up. So what do you make of what have you been watching? What's been your favorite match so far, whether it's Copa? I know we've only had one Copa America, or Euros.
It's all of it. It's the fact that we've got soccer in the morning, we've got soccer in the afternoon, and soccer at night, and then we got MLS on the weekends. It's flat. It's just amazing, and they're all such fun, compelling storylines. You know, it really is a representation of soccer, this global game, this diversity, this difference of styles. You know, obviously, the Euros have been amazing with the kind of fans and the stadiums. And I was joking with somebody, Germany knows how to put on tournaments. I mean, they're just run so well. But then you see Copa start last night, and it's a little bit different flavor, and I love that part of it. So I'm excited for the game tonight. I'm excited for the U.S. to get off and running on Sunday against Bolivia. And certainly even today, there was some nice flavor to some of the games. I thought the Poland-Austria game had some great flavor to it today. So, yeah, it's been great. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's just like we've got soccer 24/7.
I'm with you. I love waking up in the morning and like the coverage is already going. You know, that is like, you just flip on the TV in the morning. It's kind of, you're getting the stuff ready. You're getting coffee, you're getting going. And there it is. It's kind of like when you have a World Cup in another country, and we in the United States gets to wake up and it's already happening. But speaking of the Euros, though, I want to ask you, so like, is England in a dire situation here? I mean, should they light the thing on fire and blow it all up? Or, you know, I feel like you can't pay attention to the Twitter X machine because, you know, fans and the pundits are so fickle.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, we forget it doesn't matter how you look at the beginning of a tournament. It matters that you get through your group and you get stronger every game. So for me, I think the two strongest teams after two games, which again is just after two games, it's definitely Spain and Germany. They have looked like been firing all cylinders, and in some ways that's sometimes hard because that means they have to keep that level and go higher to really achieve the goals of winning it. I think England has a lot of room for improvement. They have a great offense. They have probably maybe the best depth of offensive players in the tournament. And they have challenges about how they're going to create a good defensive structure around that. And so my viewpoint is that they're still trying to find their identity within how they're going to really compete and try to win for the Euro. And I don't think they're in a bad position. I think they have 4 points. Certainly looks like they can go through and they can get better. But they definitely have to find a better balance of that midfield and defensive like kind of unity, but letting the players go more offensively and really kind of a more free-flowing soccer. So my gut says he's got to retool the center of the midfield a bit more, figure out, probably, acknowledge Trent is not a makeshift center midfielder. I would probably make him be a little bit more offensive by putting Declan Rice in front of the four and then allowing Bellingham and Foden. And then that really, out of the teams of the Euros, you now probably have the best offensive group or front six. And I don't think he's done that yet. So, but interesting. I mean, again, I love the drama. I think it should be there. The criticism of how they've played, given that roster, is very, and it's you're okay to criticize. But like France, those teams tend to grow into the tournament as it goes.
I'll tell you what, Spain, and like I don't know what is happening. What are they doing over there in Spain between the men's and the women's teams right now? But the men were so fun to watch the other day. And then when they have some of that young talent, which I know everybody was blown up about it, but in general, the way they played the game, I mean, I don't know. There were certain aspects, and I haven't been able to watch every minute of every game. It's just been impossible. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how many I record on my television. I'm not getting back to all of them for the full 90 minutes. It's just impossible. But what about just like a story that has stuck out to you? Because there's always these good underlying stories that are maybe non-soccer related. We can talk about Ukraine, Christian Eriksen scoring a goal, like whatever it might be. Like, what's the best story that you've maybe seen or heard or tuned into?
Yeah, well, you obviously brought up Spain, so I think I got to respond at first to one of the countries that I relate to and my family is from. They are a joy so far. I mean, I will tell you, like, if you want to kind of start to see potentially evolution of where soccer is going, I do think that Spain is one of those countries that tends to be on the front foot of it in that, I actually didn't love them the last decade. I know they won a lot, but it was kind of death by soccer, which was the way to win at the time, was to not have the other team have the ball. They can't score. You'll eventually get 1 or 2 goals and the game's over. And it was tough. And I think teams and countries figured it out, and they no longer could score, and they started losing games like 1 or 2-1. And even though they had 70% possession, they barely had any chances, and the other team barely had chances, but the other team would win by a goal or two. They have elevated this possession with repossession, with repressing now, with Nico Williams and Yamil, like of this. Let's go vertical. Let's go get at them. We'll get a chance. If we lose it, we're right back at it. Then we're going vertical again. So that Italy game I thought was a great example of the potential of what future could look like for a lot of these countries, because it felt fast. It felt like it was much more vertical and dangerous. And to your point, it was great. I mean, it really overwhelmed Italy, a team that tends to deal well with good attacking soccer, where they can defend and counterattack. And Spain just was all over them for 90 minutes. So I really enjoyed that. I love the Christian Eriksen story. I thought that was a great one. I think to bring it home, Robin Lod was 10 yards from Christian Eriksen on the day that he collapsed. I don't know if a lot of people remember, they were playing Finland. So my brain just went to what that must have been like for Robin at the time, and certainly Pookie as well. But then also to kind of see that moment. And I think the story is the crowds, the food wars I love, the paella versus what was it?
What were they doing with the spaghetti
pasta.
the other day?
Yeah, it was the paella versus the pasta, the breaking of the spaghetti,
Yes.
all of it. Pretty good. Yeah.
I saw that video. And then I saw a video this morning. It might have been from yesterday. I don't know. I'm all confused with the time zones and whatnot. But did you see that one that I think it was Men in Blazers tweeted out, where the guy was just totally passed out on the sidewalk and he had a pint on his they are really enjoying themselves over there.
Yeah, and again, I mean the great thing is the kind of connectivity of the global fun of it, I mean, again, I haven't seen behind the scenes, but it seems like it hasn't been scary. It hasn't been aggressive. The fans want to celebrate and they don't want to like go after the other country's fans. So far, it seems to me like it's been just a good global celebration, which is such a cool thing about that soccer brings to the world.
I was just going to say that it's kind of like what we see with the World Cups oftentimes, right? All these countries and all these different cultures and people get together in one place and they're all like there for the same thing to support like their country, but their team in soccer and enjoy a really tremendous game. So it's always fun to see the celebrations and then fans being in the same space, even if they come from completely different places. I want to ask you about Shaqiri. Like, what do you think the reaction was when he scores? Like, I mean, do you think people in Chicago were like, "Oh, of course you do that for Switzerland," or people were like, "Yes, do well there, so you will get signed by somebody else and move on from you"? Like, what do you think the reaction was?
Um, I mean, it's what the sport is. You know, it like again, I think it is a good example of club team is different than national team. Last national team, you tend to have moments and events like that are for a month, where a club team is a long season that you got to build a lot of rapport, a lot of relationships. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to be challenged as a group and individually. And you've got
I
to
mean,
be
it does help if you run a little bit.
yeah, but that's what I mean. You got to be all in and committed. Whereas this situation, you can maybe play sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 60 minutes, or come on and do things. It's probably a little bit easier for him to be impactful. Where again, I think that commitment in the club level is probably in some ways harder because it's a longer season. But it's also he got there early because I think they let him go early. So maybe he had extra time to prepare.
I think they shoved him on the plane.
Yes. Yeah.
Frank. Frank.
Yeah, and there's no doubt right now they've won 2 or 3 in a row. So there's going to be some interesting tension post Euros in Chicago Fireland.
Yeah, I agree. I know. I'm just it's kind of too bad because I feel like he scored such a ridiculous goal. But then a lot of the chatter online and whatnot was about like not doing it for Chicago, and you go and do that. You know what I mean? Like instead of just paying attention to the fact that he scored this incredible goal for Switzerland and for his country, like which is what we're doing for most players that are from MLS and playing in Euros or in Copa. We want them to do well. We love it when they show on this stage and then they come back to this league and come back to their club team here in the United States. So to that point, speaking of the guys that are participating from Minnesota United, and well, let me focus on Copa America real quick, just with Canada playing Argentina last night. I know Dane St. Clair and Tanny not on the pitch, but what do you think an experience in a moment like that is for those guys to they played in friendlies. Dane was at the World Cup in 2022. I know that, but what do you think that was like for them to be a part of that? And maybe more particular Tanny, just because it's his first kind of foray into this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Minnesota United family, myself personally, so always proud of any of our players that go represent their national teams in whatever competition, friendlies, big tournaments. And then you add a layer of the fact that they're playing against one of the most historic national teams of all time. And then you add another layer that they're playing against, not arguably, I mean, you lose the debate, the greatest soccer player in the history of the game. And all of those elements lead to like there's a sense of pride, for that I think trickles back into the Minnesota United family. Certainly we have 4 players playing in Copa America, and that's awesome. And I think it might be the most of any team in the league, which shows another sense of pride. So I thought Canada fought and battled really well last night, but it was also really cool to see a team in this hemisphere fighting against one of the better teams in the history of the game.
Well, we also have, you just mentioned the 4, we have Alejandro Braun and also Carlos Harvey playing for their respective national teams, which again, it's always nice to see on that stage. But also, what does that do for Minnesota United when we talk about depth of roster? Tanny clearly a starter, Dane clearly a starter, Alejandro and Carlos have been contributors to what this team has done this season. What does that do for the depth of this roster and maybe how Minnesota United wants to change the game or keep the level up in a game? What have you seen from the Seattle match and the Dallas match, which are challenging places to go, also back-to-back and also shorthanded, that maybe things like this with these call-ups in this window in this time frame, and then Pookie just happened to be injured at the same time and Padelford going down. What does that do for the depth of this team when you have to deal with that and kind of shuffle?
Well, I think we're at a point in the season where we're learning that it's tough to win games when you have adversity of a thin roster and you have moments where you don't have your full roster and then things come fast and furious. So I would start it even with the Dallas game of the international break at
Yes.
home,
Yep.
and the challenges of having 9 guys out and really playing a young roster. And arguably, I thought it was a great 1-1 tie, but you're dropping points at home in a game that I think if you have your full team, you feel pretty confident about getting the 3 points. So I think it's the reality of it. It's a big adversity kind of month for the club. I think we could kind of lament away from the club and talk about the league and how I think the league needs to evolve because so many players, I mean, I think it was north of 100 international players um, are missing when we have participated in international weekends now, which is just too much. I mean, the integrity of the league, the integrity of the game. I understand the calendar challenges. I understand we're trying to navigate a FIFA window that's in the fall, winter, and spring, and we have a league that's kind of in the spring, summer, fall, and a little bit into winter. But there's no doubt that that's the adversity part of it. And I think the league, and it's a great reality that we have to solve that problem, I think, on the league level. And they have to, because we have to get better at that. At the same time, I don't want to make excuses that this is a part of this time of the season where we're learning, good and bad, that we still have moments where we still got to get better. And we've got to kind of navigate the adversity of whether it's injuries now, whether it's call ups. The season is what it is. Other teams have some call ups, other teams have some injuries. And so ultimately, it hasn't been an easy week to kind of navigate the challenges. So, and I think that's where we're at right now. And again, we'll have a quick turnaround, play really quickly against Austin tomorrow. And like I said, I think the Seattle game a little bit differently than the Dallas game. We can dive into that, but certainly I'm throwing that word adversity because there's been some challenges in the last couple of weeks that have made it tough for the group.
Is it more challenging as a manager? Because our podcast guru Kyle put the note in here, the last manager from Minnesota to ever win a game in Seattle. First of all, what is it that makes Seattle so difficult? Because if there's a time to beat Seattle at Seattle is now, because they've not been great, right? But also, what is it more difficult as a manager or coach when you're losing games in different ways? Or, where you like can't pinpoint like there's a specific issue, or our Minnesota, you just said the Seattle game is a little bit different than the Dallas game. What do you think the issues were in Seattle versus Dallas, and how do you navigate those as a head coach?
Sure. Yeah, so I did see in the notes there I was the last manager to win in Seattle. That's an interesting side note, but I think that's relevant in that we want to ignore it because every year, every game is just a new game, one off. But there's no doubt, we have now built up, a reality of the storyline that Seattle is a place that we haven't gotten a point, and in the MLS iteration. So it's now there. And I think the guys went into that game, ready to fight and battle to get a point or 3 points that night. And I thought we started off really well. I thought our defensive shape and our midfield play was actually really good. I just don't think we were finishing plays off quite the way we usually do. And that just let Seattle get some confidence and get into the game. And then once they scored, I think the realities of just the overarching Devin going down in the 8 seconds in, having to switch things up, and now to manage a game where now the adversity of our lineup and our subs, it all kind of came together for Eric in a tough way. And that one, I don't think we ever got better from the beginning of the game to the end. I think our best moments of the game were by far the first 12 to 15 minutes, maybe that minute 45 to 51 where we almost started to take over the game before they got the second goal. I like that period of the game too. But that's more where you're saying, yep, there was large parts of that game we didn't play that well either offensively or defensively, and we didn't control it. The Dallas game I looked at differently. I think the Dallas game, we're giving up 5 goals, you're going to have a bad defensive night, but it wasn't overall 90 minutes of bad defense, and it wasn't overall 90 minutes of bad offense. We actually controlled a lot of the game. We actually played well. We controlled the tempo, created a lot of chances, but we gave up some really bad counterattack moments that led to goals and led to 5 goals. And you're just not going to win games when that happens. So ultimately, I said they're very different losses. I think Eric has learned a lot about the group with those 2 losses. I think he's, excited for tomorrow. And I think we're like, hey, we are where we are right now when we have to deal with adversity. Yes, we always want to win when we have to deal with adversity, but hopefully we're learning. So as the season goes on, we're ready to deal with the adversity, when it matters a little bit more towards getting into the playoffs and making a run.
One of the things I was just actually on the call with the head coach Eric Ramsey for Apple MLS on the weekend, and one of the questions was about Pookie, and he mentioned him being absent right now with injury. But I mean, how much of a miss is that? Not just for the team, but for Pookie, that you have Tanny gone, and this would be an opportunity, and not to say focus on the things that can't happen, the players that aren't here. But Pookie has been out of the starting 11, and not, he's coming off a really good international appearance with Finland, but suffers an injury. And now he's not available for this team right now in a moment where it would have been real nice to have him. And then nice for him to be here and contribute as well, maybe get some of that mojo back.
Yeah, it's interesting. We sit here and I pontificate about my opinions. You do as well, about the game and about how we should be playing, how we should be winning, or how the guys individually should be doing. And I think it's a good moment to remind ourselves about how hard this game is mentally and physically. So not only in the moment do you need to have the team playing well, the group playing well, and you individually need to be kind of contributing, playing well, but you also have these injury kind of moments are out of your control, or the fact that Dane goes out there and has a pretty darn good game against Holland, but the next guy has a great game against France, and now he's not starting again. But there's still many years for Dane to become the starter for the Canadian national team. Pookie has a different trajectory where he's had a great career in Europe. He's still finding his way. He's had some good moments here. This season's been a little bit like flowing into it, and you feel like right now, after a great international break, scoring 2 goals against Portugal, he's ready to like really feel comfortable here. And then he gets the injury. So it's just a nice reminder about how hard mentally it is individually to navigate being a professional soccer player and being ready. And certainly I lament as a part of the club that on paper, there's perfect timing for all of that to come together. We're going to need somebody to help us find goals and to kind of really, build a new identity of our attack as Eric builds this team. And Tani being gone for the Copa America, that it's tough. But again, that goes back to what the last couple of weeks have been. We've had a lot of adversity, and Pookie being out is just another example of that.
Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots.
When you look at this, kind of recapping the Dallas match in a little bit more detail, because I feel like it's pretty fresh. I believe you were in Dallas as well, but I'm surprised, actually shocked that you went to that game, because I remember sitting several times in that press area during a lot of rain delays and thunderstorms. I'm surprised you picked Dallas to go back to, just knowing that can happen in June, but you guys got a nice clean game, which was nice. But when you look at that game and the stats, and an 8-goal game, you think you score 3 goals on the road, you can find a way to win that game. How much of it was lack of communication or a little discombobulation on the back line with the mistakes that happened and how wide open guys for Dallas were and they buried their chances? Or was it lack of finishing your opportunities when you had them if you were Minnesota United? What do you think the biggest thing that swung that game was, as especially you were watching it in person?
Yeah, it really was an interesting game, and I don't think all soccer games are interesting, but and massively frustrating, obviously, giving up 5 goals. If I block out the 5 goals, though, Kyndra, this is where it gets really weird and interesting. We played some outstanding soccer. We really controlled the tempo, and not just in a way where we had possession deep, but we were creating chances. We were moving the ball quickly. If you saw it live, there was probably 4 or 5 times each half where we had such great buildup and the tempo was right and it led to a great chance. And really when we lost the ball, we so quickly repressed and won in good spots. And I think you mentioned the weather was outstanding that night. It was a really good night. Usually in Dallas, it's hot and muggy. It was one of those nights where it wasn't too bad. It was a little bit of overcast side. So I think it came down to just those few moments that we gave up a counterattack where we felt like we should be in good position and we should cover it. We just didn't. And, you know, once we got back in the game and tied it each time, we started playing well and we allowed that counterattack again. So when you do that once, okay. When you do it twice, okay. The third and fourth time was where like, this is probably not going to be our night. And that's really frustrating. So that's when it got tough. You know, that's when you're now, you know, it's fair to be frustrated because the soccer was there, but the club, and I know Eric and I know the staff and I know the expectation is that's too many mistakes in one game. And you're not going to win at home or on the road when you're giving up 5 goals. And that's it, you know. And even if I sit here and say, oh my gosh, but watch the game, we played so well. At the end of the day, we know, and I know that the team knows, the club knows. That's just you can't start with that. That is your match. 5 goals is too many. So that's it. Simple.
Okay, but in that lineup, and maybe not even, maybe it was somebody came off the bench. Who stood out to you in that game, or what thing in particular? I believe Robin was playing a little bit higher up the field, more as would you call him a number 9? I don't know. I feel like Robin, the way he plays, we could kind of put him anywhere, but the way they lined up in the formation, attacking versus defending. Caden playing more in the wingback role, but this time on the right-hand side. What stood out to you in that game, or maybe an individual at a positive light that you were like, wow, that really worked for how we've had to shuffle and move some things around?
Yeah, I like that you brought up Caden. I thought he was really lively and bright. And, you know, again, I think outside back, wing back is somewhere it looks like where Eric is liking to see Caden settle, at least for how this season has begun. That's where he's been playing. And I think he's just getting fitter and fitter and starting to come into the game more. You know, he had some nice crosses, some nice moments into Bongi, some nice tempo back across the field. So, you know, I thought he and Joseph, to me, were very, very lively, very good. I thought Joseph had another really good game. So Bongi, again, very lively. I think we need the finishing, but we know that's not going to always come every game. But I think this is probably the game that I felt he was getting higher up the field, you know, good late runs in the box, you know, getting good stuff going. So I think the only downside was, you know, the giving up the ball, not him, but the group, you know, losing the ball, bad spot for Ferreira for the 4th goal that kind of really put it out of reach. But ultimately, you know, I think a lot of players had lively, solid games. Again, to me, it's just these group defending moments of the counterattack, and kind of through the middle for the most part. It wasn't really wide. It was through the middle that really hurt us. So, but that's why I said this is a weird one for me. I mean, I felt like there was a lot of players that had some nice, lively games that are encouraging on the long term of going forward as a club.
And then looking ahead at Austin, just when you try to translate being back at home, which is always a huge bonus. I know Eric mentioned on our call, like, you know, the expectation for what you do at home against Austin versus on the road at Dallas, where, you know, you've come from Seattle, you've gone home, now you travel to Dallas, you talk about change in climate, the travel, the rotation in the squad, plus you have not a whole lot of traveling supporters. You know, so just the energy that you're going to get automatically from Allianz Field, the performance and the energy and what you bring should be sort of next level against Austin on the weekend. I think DJ Taylor is a little bit more healthy and back in the mix. I know he came off the bench in the last game, but maybe more able to. He said Devin Padelford still, you know, a little bit off, not quite there yet. But as far as
the concussion protocol is a little bit slower, although I think it's going really well.
Yes.
But again, those are things you got to make sure you do the right way.
Right. Exactly. You know, so just trying to figure out who he's going to have available for him and who might be in the mix more than they were the other night. And maybe DJ Taylor might be the highlight of that. It's just what he's available for to bring is how many minutes. But what do you see from this Austin side? I mean, this has kind of been how well do you know Josh Wolf? Like, I don't know how much you've interacted with him.
I mean, we were former teammates, you know.
Okay.
I've got enough gray hair that I'm former teammates with a lot of people. But,
I know, that's why I never know to get. Yeah. I'm not gonna tell
you know. He was a very young, up and coming, awesome winger player when I played for Chicago Fire. We won a championship there together. And And, he's really, I think, done a great job of taking the stress and the challenges of their own level at the beginning of the year to where they are now, which is they're building into being a pretty tough team to play and having really good moments. So I think the first part of what you said there, Kyndra, is really just good to see DJ back out. So I think that's a good indication that when you're coming back from that type of hamstring, it can go one of two ways. And knock on wood, right now, it looks like it's going to, like, he could be available and healthy based on he had some really good minutes coming off a hamstring injury where it could go the other way and we don't see DJ for a couple more weeks. So it's really good news that we're getting a few more people back. The challenge, and Michael Boxall is another one, him
playing through injury, basically.
Played through injury and got through it and looked pretty good and should be available. So those are the positive. The challenges are all what we just talked about for the last couple of weeks in terms of the expectation of where we want our level to go. It hasn't been where we want it to be. Now we have 3 games in a week. The travel, the fatigue, the mental fatigue, it's going to be there. And you're exactly right. We're going to need a great atmosphere at Allianz on Saturday. We're going to need the fans, our players, to fight through this. I think after this game, we'll have a week break before we go to Portland. So it's so important that we just embrace that 3 games a week are happening. It's going to be tough. Both teams played Wednesday. Austin, I think they've got a good result for them against LAFC. Maybe a little bit down because they were up 1-0 late, but at the end of the day, I think anybody getting that kind of result against LAFC, it's something to build on. So I'll also have a little bit of a personal kind of taste. I think they beat us 4-1 here last year.
Yes.
It's got to be our worst loss at home. I can't remember a worse loss actually at Allianz Field. So there's a little something in that. I think hopefully that's not saying that players should overthink that. I'm just going to say it to you and me and the fans. That puts a little bad taste in my mouth as well.
Well, and you have to think back, even though, to a positive in the fact that you went on the road in the opening game of the year and got a result from some quality players on the road this season against Austin, which was fun to see. And that was so Cameron Knowles, I believe, right? To start the season this year, to go to Austin, to start the season that way. I think everybody didn't know what to expect. So knowing that at least against this group, you've gotten a result. But when you have a player, if you're Austin, like Sebastian Driussi, what do you see from a player like that when you see what he's capable of on the field? Who's he most maybe comparable to? But I do feel like he's the kind of player that he can't single-handedly spin a game on its head, maybe like an Acosta, like a Luciano Acosta. He's got quality, but he doesn't have maybe the same input on the match as like an Acosta does. What do you see from a player like Driussi?
Yeah, I think where you're nervous is it's maybe not as 90 minutes as impactful as Acosta or even Mukhtar, who's another one I like, but he's got elements of any game of any moment of really, so he's maybe not going to carry the tempo, but he still has that offensive danger for 90 minutes where he can do something. So ultimately for me, he's really one that we have to watch. He's so dangerous and he's so skilled and has really great moments. So my answer would be we have to make sure we're aware of him and make sure that we are organized, we're structured, and we're sound.
Is there anybody? Sorry, go ahead.
No, just defensively, especially. Yeah.
I was just going to say, is there anybody on this roster for Austin that, like we just talked about Driussi, but he's the one that, oftentimes gets highlighted, that if people that are listening or watching this and they're going to go to the game or watch the game on Saturday and they're thinking, okay, Manny said I should take a look at how this guy plays, how this guy operates. Maybe it doesn't show up on the score sheet. Who would you maybe pick from this Austin roster?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, let's look at Driussi first and foremost. And then after that, it's kind of people that we've dealt with in the league offensively, but they're all dangerous in their own way. We've got our own Minnesota native, Ethan Finley, who's just great at making runs off the shoulder, wide and inside. Mm-hmm. And he'll do that 2 or 3 times each half. And they're great runs. And that could open us up because he likes to get in behind. O'Brien is fast. He used to play for Dallas and he's got speed in the wing. And he's another one that connects well with Driussi. And then I'm guessing, it'll be Diego Rubio again. It might be Zardes, guys that we've dealt with. I think if it's Zardes, you're dealing with more kind of a forward that likes to make good runs in the box and kind of tries to hold up play. Diego Ruby's kind of just this clever fighter, that will try to find a goal here and there in battle. So to me,
He's kind of a pain in the butt.
yeah, and I say that, and that's a tough team to play. These are veteran MLS players that collectively, are doing pretty well for themselves. So I think it's one of those ones where they seem to be getting better and into what they're doing. I think of a fan. Alexander Ring has been a great journeyman player in MLS. He was great for NYCFC for many years. I think he's somebody I like to watch just because he's been around a long time. I followed him in Europe a little bit too, so he's a fun one to watch. So, but ultimately that front four, if that's the group that played last Wednesday, they're tough to handle. Like I said, they've been around the MLS and they know how to get results.
Any matchup in particular that you're going to keep an eye on this weekend? Anything that excites you that you're like, oh, I got to make sure to watch that one besides the Minnesota United Austin game, until I'm assuming you'll be at in person?
It's just my brain is just going to Bolivia, USA.
All right, well, hey, hit it. Preview it. Who's going to win that game?
It's just, to me, it's interesting. It'll be, I believe there's going to be a great support at Cowboy Stadium for us, the U.S., which isn't always the case. And obviously we got a South American championship in the U.S. with CONCACAF teams. We're not going to be the home team in our country every game, but I think we will be this Sunday. I think it's one of those ones where anything but like a multi-goal win, it will be super disappointing. This is a massively a home game against a team that I think outside of their country is somebody we should handle pretty handily. So I'm just really excited about it, and I'm excited to kind of see that group continue to show that they're going to be great. Get out of this group. That's the most important thing. And then hopefully show well in Copa America.
Yeah, speaking of that, because I feel like there was like the tale of two friendlies between the Colombia match and the Brazil match, and maybe the Colombia match wasn't as bad as everybody said it was, and maybe the Brazil one was, I don't know, I think a 1-1 draw against Brazil is pretty good, but I feel like they needed that heading into Copa America. And then what do you think they needed to do in Copa America to sort of feel like they're on this upward trajectory? I know 2026 feels far, but it's really not. What do you think they need to do in Copa to, besides just, you think just getting out of their group is enough?
No. I expect at least semifinals.
Okay.
For sure. If you look at our roster and the players we have, I would say, the fight we had against Brazil is what we need combined with the quality of players that we have that are in the clubs around the world. So I think the two of those things need to not only be there. For example, Brazil didn't have to play and fight every game because they're Brazil. They step on the field. They remind me of the U.S. women's team. I don't know if the U.S. women's team always has to have the same fight that the men's team does. So for me, that's the first thing. I think I'm also nervous because Colombia is on a 22-game match non-losing streak. Yeah. Brazil is 6th in qualifying for the World Cup. So those score lines might even be more similar than I'd like to actually my brain to think about, because Colombia is maybe one of the best teams right now in South America, or Brazil's probably has their worst team in 40 years on the field right now. So having said that, I do think you're right. And the preparation between this is going to kind of just give our guys that sense of we got to play for 90 minutes. We have to move the ball. We have to win the midfield. We have to be organized. We have to get forward. I think Christian Pulisic, his explosiveness needs to kind of, an output needs to happen every game for us to be successful. So I'm just excited. I think it's going to be fun for us to see ourselves and how we compete in this country against top talent in this hemisphere.
Yeah, I kind of miss having like the watch parties when we did that for the World Cup in 2022 up at Allianz in the Brew Hall, and it was November. It was like weird, but it was awesome. Like I kind of wish we could. I maybe there are things going on around here and I don't even know about it because everybody's just so busy. But that I think anytime there's world football or international football and people are representing their countries, it just brings a whole nother vibe to the soccer community that's already here. And it's fun to see everybody come together, and there's so many legends in the Minnesota community. I mean, you and I and Tony did a lot of stuff in the 2022 World Cup, which was fun to get your guys' perspective on that. So I should say Minnesota United hosting Austin on Saturday, 7:30 Central Time on Apple. MLS season pass. I got to make sure I get that in there. I might really be in trouble if I don't get that in there. But thanks, Manny, for joining me. I'm sure we'll be watching the game tonight, and then we'll be tuning into USA Bolivia on Sunday. Another great weekend of soccer lies ahead.
It's going to be great. Hopefully this rain will come through, and then tomorrow will be another beautiful night. We've had a great run of beautiful nights at Allianz Field.
I mean, all the way back to the opening game against Columbus.
Knock on wood, because I'll take rain all week for a beautiful night at Allianz on Saturday any day. So let's hopefully we have another one tomorrow night.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Manny. Appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time, and tune in next week, everybody, for another match preview of Minnesota United.